My name is Brian Gomsky, and I'm your host for Engineering Tomorrow, where we talk with top performers and engineering experts about their strategies to optimize indoor air, process cooling, and more. This week, we have Dustin Schafer of Henderson Engineers back on the air discussing his role as Chief Technical Officer. What does a CTO do? Should every engineering firm have one? And much, much more. Get comfortable. Grab a drink, sit back and relax as we dive right in to Engineering Tomorrow.
Broadcasting around the world. This is Engineering Tomorrow, the podcast committed to bringing you the best in commercial construction, design, and engineering from the brightest minds in the industry. This is the stuff they don't teach you in school. So sit back, relax, and open your mind. You're about to get the insider knowledge to improve your next construction project or advance your career. This is Engineering Tomorrow.
All right, we are back with another episode of Engineering Tomorrow, and we have one of our favorite guests, Dustin Schafer, on from Henderson Engineers, as well as Spencer Kaufman from Midwest Machinery, Kansas City. Dustin, last time you were on, I think we were talking about safety as relating to airborne pathogens in commercial spaces. That was a very well-received episode.
Oh, good. That was 6 months of my life dedicated to researching that subject.
Yeah, I can't believe it's been that long. Feels a lot longer, I guess, in current times. But so now you're in a new role than the last time we spoke, and I've been following you on LinkedIn, and you've been posting a lot of interesting stuff. So, Dustin, your new role now is Chief Technical Officer at Henderson Engineers. Tell me a little bit about what a Chief Technical Officer is and how it relates to your firm.
The short definition that I like is that it's my job to work on developing the products that our clients want to buy. So that's different from developing the infrastructure that runs those projects or runs those products. You know, it's what are our clients buying and how do we do a better job at creating those products?
Is this a role that you've been wanting to get into, or how did this kind of come about?
Yeah, I think for us, like most things at Henderson, it was a natural evolution of our business. So I moved through a group focused on quality to take more of a bigger picture view on engineering. And then we realized that engineering and quality is really a pillar of our technical work. It isn't our technical work. So we added innovation and, BIM and virtual design and construction and sustainability along with that engineering pillar. And that gets to be enough that it's a job to manage those individual pillars. So we created this whole infrastructure and realized we need a CTO to manage all of the things we want to accomplish technically. So it kind of evolved from that. It wasn't, I want to be the CTO. What do we do underneath it? It was
right.
A bottom up thing. Yeah.
What do you?
Go ahead. That's really cool that a lot of companies out there, they create their pillars to put on their website and maybe use as a recruiting tool, and then it's just there, and they don't ever change anything with their organizational structure or do anything to support those pillars. So that's really awesome that, you guys started from the ground up, started from the roots, and to have the role to support what is important to you guys. That speaks a lot for Henderson. So kudos.
Yeah, thank you.
And when you said create products, so we have a wide range of audience members, from people in engineering school to contractors and to seasoned engineers. When you say create products, how does that relate to an engineering firm? What does that mean?
Yeah, we're a professional services organization, right? So we consult on a wide range of things, but our product is really is buildings in the end. So there's all kinds of little verticals that fit under that. One of those is creating permit sets to work with contractors to get things built. That's an important thing for us, but that's not the only thing. You help clients make decisions. Like the process around decision making is a product that we offer. We have a consulting service around that. the permit sets are a thing that we offer. We help people with procurement. We manage subs. We manage the construction. Like those are all different products to us. They're just under that heading of getting buildings built with clients.
And is this a role that is typically found in an engineering firm? Or is this something new for the engineering world?
I don't know. It's a good question. I would imagine it's a role that exists everywhere. Whether it's titled this is probably debatable, right? There are pieces of this that are operational. There's pieces of it that, I work with marketing and our CIO and CFO. And I imagine if you have a smaller company, you consolidate those things. Like you could call all of those things COO at a really small company.
Sure.
Or if you have a giant, 50,000 person firm, you might have 10 levels. Like what I call CTO might be 10 different jobs at a bigger company.
What is the day in the life of a CTO look like?
Yeah. Right now,
I guess that could be a loaded question.
Yeah. Right now it consists of checking in with a lot of people on the progress of things. So you talked about LinkedIn. One of my posts on LinkedIn was the 10 things I consider to be important in my role. It's just this top 10 list of stuff I'm working on. And I seriously go through that every day and think like, what am I doing to move these things forward every day? Mm-hmm. And then there's projects underneath that. We have projects related to innovation. And so I'll check in with the director of innovation and say, how's this project going? How's this going? I'll talk to the machine learning guy, say, how's this thing we're working on? Talk to quality. I'll talk to Jared, the director of engineering, and say, okay, we were having these issues on this project. How are those getting resolved? Like it's really right now a ton of coordination and trying to get everybody pointed in the same direction.
Sure. So you kind of within that pillar, are you setting the vision for kind of how that pillar is going to go? And then you've obviously been in the industry a long time, and you're kind of devoting your energy based on where it's needed at the time, or?
Yeah, for now, it's a lot of vision setting, and that I have to imagine that evolves. There'll be periods where it's super technical lifting on a certain project. But for now, it's like, if we have a goal to mitigate climate change, what are we really doing? Mm-hmm. And which clients is that the most important to, and how do we align their goals with our goals, and where do we focus efforts so we actually achieve something towards that end? Yeah, it's a lot of that.
Talk more about, for example, so let's talk about climate change. I know you guys are very big proponents and very vocal about that. Mm-hmm. So what would that look like, speaking about just that topic in general, with aligning your organization with your clients? So
right now, I've been talking about climate change. I'm in my mid-40s. I've been talking about it for 20 years, trying to get traction on it. The last 6 months, people don't want to hear me pushing them. They're pulling us into things.
Sure. Yeah.
So right now what that looks like is, how do we design all electric buildings? How do we use low global warming potential refrigerants? It's beyond efficiency. Efficiency is a prerequisite. So I'm meeting with clients and they're saying, we have a goal of net zero buildings by this day. Sure. So what does A, help us quantify what net zero means? B, get rid of these refrigerants, and C, design all electric buildings. There's real work to be done in being able to do that. So as an example,
for sure,
if you want an all electric building that has a kitchen in it, a lot of kitchen equipment is not a slam dunk electric thing right now. Like, people like gas cooking, and there's a lot of non-electric uses in that. So then it literally turns into a technical problem of dealing with engineers on the ground saying, let's go find this equipment and figure out, what does it cost relative to that? What's the use? How does that affect the demand load on the building? How do you have to change the service? There's a lot of behind the scenes work to be able to answer those questions effectively for clients.
So you kind of spearhead that?
I ask the questions. I think it would be overstating it. I always tell people I get too much credit for doing actual work. Like, what I say is that these are the questions that need to be answered. So let's prioritize answering those over answering these and try to get all of us working in the same direction so we make progress on something.
Okay. You mentioned, I've also seen you comment on data security in the past. And to me, that's not something I think about when I think about an engineering firm. But how might that role for the engineers be changing? And I always think back to, we had someone on a year or two ago from another engineering firm talking about how a casino was hacked through the Wi-Fi fish tank temperature probe. So how might that role be changing for engineers? Or maybe I'm just completely obtuse and it's always been a high priority for engineering firms. Maybe speak on that a little bit.
So the way I would describe that is we used to have lots of systems that were kind of disaggregated, right? Like they were all like, it was hard to make any progress on anything. The analogy is like it was a wool sweater, right? Like you pull on a thread and you just get the little short thread and you got to go find another one and pull on it. And then if you start to integrate everything together and all of a sudden it's that sweater where you can just pull one thread and it just keeps unraveling the whole deal back and forth, right? So as we tie all this stuff together and as all of our clients become data companies, like that's a lot of our clients, they're in the business of data. And so all these things integrated together means we have to up our focus on not being the weak point in that chain. Mm-hmm. So if we're designing all these systems that are backdoor entry into all these other high profile targets, all of a sudden we're a target, right?
Sure.
We have to design with data security in mind. And to me, I'm not an IT person. I don't pretend to be a cybersecurity expert, but what I'm working on is making sure that our work processes are built around security by default. So right now what we're working on is we don't restrict access by need. We restrict access by default, and then you add it back in as you need it. So it used to be the old way of doing it was there was a list of people who couldn't get into something, and you'd maintain that list. And now we say nobody can get into anything. You have to be intentionally added in because not because I think our employees are dishonest and are going to get into things that they shouldn't be into, but we're targets, right? I'm a target. Sure. Somebody wants to hack and get my credentials,
right,
so that they can go access all the things I have access to. So I shouldn't have access to things by default. So it's more of a mindset shift from a CTO perspective of how do we work with security as a default, not as an add-on.
You're listening to Engineering Tomorrow, always striving to bring you the best in commercial construction, design, and engineering.
What are some other things that you're working on, or maybe let's talk about where do you see the industry in Henderson moving forward with just the way the world's going? Where do you see it in 10 years, 20 years?
Yeah, the big topics for me right now are, I think there's 5, right, that we're pushing on in different ways. So one is, I say modularity of design, and that gets misunderstood. I don't do a good job of communicating it. So when I say modularity, I mean like Legos are module, like a little kit of parts, not in the way that like a dollhouse is a module, right? Like,
sure.
That's a huge module. I'm talking about the kit of parts modularity and designing around things in a repetitive way so that we reduce waste and we can be faster in the way we design, and you can build faster. That's a thing for us. So what is the kit of parts that we design around? The reason that matters to me is because another big pillar is automating the basics of design. And to me, if you can make your design more repetitive because it's parts, it's easier to automate.
Sure.
So it's easier to automate the layout of ductwork if it's the same pieces you're putting together, as opposed to, how do I fold sheet metal to make any possible thing, right? So I was talking to the director of innovation this morning, and the analogy we used is that people used to have to go to tailors to get clothes, and that people still do that, right? Sure. You can still go get a great suit from a tailor, but way more people have access to nice clothes because we decided there were small, medium, large, extra large clothes. And if you're 6'8", 300 pounds, you probably still need to go get your clothes made. And that's okay. but most people don't fall into that category. And so what we're trying to do is figure out what's the basic set of parts for our design and not make everything a substandard version of what it was,
sure,
but take the things that can be repeatable and build those parts. So modularity and automation is one thing. Then I think you can start to use all the tools that are coming out around like generative design. So if you have modules and you've automated design processes, you can use that to create 100 options that a person can pick the best one from.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't have to go through and try a bunch of things. It tries them all, and then they pick the best one. After that, you can say, this person kept picking this option. I'm going to use machine learning to learn from that person that they picked that option. Why was that best? Machine learning is going to start to suggest better and better options. So the ultimate endpoint of modularity and automated design is the humans are making choices between layouts. They're not laying things out. So in my 10 things, I have leveraged technology but retain humanity. I'm not trying to replace humans. I'm trying to build tools that allow humans to do the things we're good at, which is making choices.
So you're not building Skynet yet, is what I'm hearing.
Man, I hope not. I'd feel really bad if that was me. But it's hard not to. It's hard not to try to do that. That's what when we build tools, it's always this temptation to say, how can I make it just a push button? Mm-hmm. And I purposefully am taking that out. So instead of one tool that goes all the way to the end, I think you should have 20 tools that a person can apply as they need to. So they can do a little piece, make a decision, do another piece, make a decision. So that's what we're working on.
That's really it sounds amazing, and it sounds like a lot of work. Mm-hmm. Tell me about the technology stack used for that. Because you're probably dealing with different parts and pieces, and how does all that flow together, and how much of it is the engineer following instructions versus it's automated on the screen?
So that's the big unknown for me right now. We loosely call that a digital transformation. Mm-hmm. And so under that, there's what is our data strategy? And then you start to look at, well, this is how my data is laid out, and these are the things I want to connect. Then you have to get into, do these two piles of data have a good API where I can connect them?
Yep.
Does one of them have functionality to be able to do machine learning, or do I have to try to connect them both to an external program to analyze data and then feed the answer to those things like that? I don't know the answer to that. I know that most of the design software doesn't have very good native machine learning capabilities from what I've seen, and most of them don't have very good APIs. Sure. So we're trying to figure out, how do you tie all that stuff together, and then you have to get into their development roadmap. What are they planning on doing? Because they're going to be better at it. My assumption is they're going to be better at it than I would. So I'm not going to develop something they're planning on. Yeah, it's that is the very cutting edge of my job, is trying to figure out what is the technology stack and what's developed and what isn't.
So do you guys have in-house developers, or how does that work then?
Yes.
Okay. So you have a whole in-house team. Okay.
Yeah. We have a great developer team that's been working. I mean, I'm guessing 15 or 20 years we've been at that.
Oh, wow.
We're now moving into, how does machine learning change not only the design work, but also our internal operations and other things. Cause if you haven't looked lately, they're pretty pre-made tools around machine learning. It's not magic. It's kind of getting to the point where, I can write macros in Excel, and that used to seem like magic to people. And now you come out of high school, people know you can go Google stuff and put it into a macro in Excel and make it do something. It's getting closer to that.
So we hear this term machine learning a lot in the news and different industries. What does machine learning mean what is machine learning, and what does it mean for Henderson Engineers specifically? Give me an example of how does machine learning could potentially play a role once it's set up, or maybe it is set up. So
it's in theory good at categories of different things. machine learning is good at image recognition, right? Like identifying certain types of images. It's good at predicting the next number in a series. Like, if we've always won this type of proposal, what is the likelihood I'm going to win the next one of those in the series, right? Or it's good at fraud detection, like detecting outliers and things. So there's categories of things that it's good at. It's not AI and it's not robots. Like it's basically running the same experiment over and over again and fine tuning the algorithm based on the results of that experiment. So you might have 100 variables and it predicts the answer correctly. You go back and the machine goes back and looks and says, well, which combination of variables gave me the right answer? I'm going to weight that heavier and run it again. Sure. Run it again. What we're trying to do is find the types of questions that it's good at answering, not say we have this tool, how do we use it?
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? You can force it and put it in a situation where it's going to give you a terrible answer after a lot of work, or you can find the ones that are good questions that ML can work for.
So it sounds like you guys are still kind of defining where you might apply that in your processes. Because I was going to ask, what would be an example experiment, if you will, that you would test with machine learning with your clients, like design layouts, stuff like that.
Those are, we have a list of questions that I feel are good ones. Those are the kinds of things, I think that's the IP. So that's where you get into what makes you a better company and a more productive company than somebody else, or what are the questions you're asking? Because the rote answer, if you talk to a consultant, they would say, well, any question you have, we can answer it using machine learning. And I think that's probably to some extent true, but some of them are much better questions than others. And that's, I'm purposefully not saying these are the questions that we're trying to answer with this, because it's a hard list to come up with.
Yeah. And before we get too far away from what we were talking about a little bit earlier, we mentioned, or you touched on what your relationships and your working relationships look like internally. But then when you're trying to do your job as CTO, you're dealing a lot with existing software or maybe existing manufacturers. So what does your relationships look like with external organizations, maybe software developers, maybe manufacturers of mechanical or electrical equipment that would, eventually be thrown into the mix with the decision-making process?
It's different depending on the question. So like I said before, we have a great IT group. We have a CIO. A lot of the more technical questions around software and networking and things, that's not in my area. That's a networking thing.
Gotcha.
But if you think about the products we specify and the designs that we put out, that's squarely in my area. So people are at different levels of sophistication, and my job is to go meet with my counterparts at these firms and see what they're doing and see what their roadmap looks like, and then figure out areas where we have overlap. Controls is a big area of innovation. And obviously, there's tons of data that come through building controls. So I'm having some good conversations there. And then honestly, I will give credit to design build subcontractors. So like mechanical or electrical subcontractors are getting really innovative in figuring out how to modularize things and apply some good decision-making algorithms to help them be more efficient. So those are really good conversations for us right now too.
Sure. They're kind of the guys that where the rubber meets the road. So
yeah. And how do you, modularizing things that's not a new conversation, but that if you start to take the data around the decisions you've made and feed that into a system and start to make decisions about what is a good module based on how do you reduce waste and therefore cost, like that's new. You couldn't necessarily do that as well before.
Yeah.
With the advancements, I mean, you guys are working on some pretty cutting edge stuff, and equipment itself, everything's got a chip in it now. I think to, even hydronic pumps now all have touch screens and computer chips and cloud data. Do you think that as fast as things are moving, is the level of education of people coming out of school keeping up with the way things are moving?
I don't know. That's I have a 14-year-old,
Yeah.
11 and a 14-year-old, and that's something that we talk about. And nobody wants to listen to their parents, but I'm always trying to get him to think about like the integration of software and hardware. To me, that's a thing that people are going to have to intuitively understand, is that everything is going to have programming associated with it, and programming can't do anything in the real world without a device attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I want to be experimenting with my kids around, building little like moisture sensors in the plants that send us an email when they need to be watered. Like that's, to me, that's where kids need to be poking around, is how do you make software real, and how do you interact with the real world? I don't know if that's happening or not. I know people my age, like I struggle with that, and you have to I have to purposely go seek out opportunities to tear stuff apart and figure out how it works, because it's not the same as it used to be.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
That's even tough these days too, because when we were kids, everything was mechanical. You actually can take it apart and see how it works. Now it's all in the cloud, or it's all digital. It's like, I don't even have the opportunity to take this apart. I remember being a kid and being like upset with my parents because they couldn't figure out how to get the cable box to integrate with the TV so that it was pretty easy with the remote. And I was like, I'll never be like that when I'm older. And now I can't even work my smart TV. I'm like, I don't know how to do this. I'm giving up. Where's the antenna?
Wait, switch with the kids. And when we're done, I'm like, you got turned off. I don't even know how to turn this off.
And Brian, back to your question, I don't know if folks in the it takes everything you can to educate yourself being in the industry and keeping up, let alone transmitting that back to the education system. And that, so yeah, it's
I mean, I think from what I've seen in the last just in my experience in this industry in the last 5 years is, I mean, even from when I started to now, everything, like I said, is getting more and more electronic. And at first there was a skepticism on the engineering side, I think, with all of that. And I think I'm starting to see more and more of the adoption and just acceptance of that. And it sounds like, again, Henderson's on the front edge of that.
We're trying to be. I mean, there's, like anything, there's overkill and useless amounts of technology that you can apply to things. And sometimes simple is better.
Right. Sure.
There's also ignoring the obvious trend. It like not putting technology into a system because it's complicated isn't the right answer. You have to figure out the right level to address what the client is after.
Sure.
It's usually not 100% of what's out there, and it's not zero.
Yeah. Right.
That's the trick, is not being afraid of it, but also not being blindly devoted to it and putting it where it doesn't need to be.
Sure.
So, Dustin, can you give some advice to young engineers who are passionate about the industry? Like, I see a lot of interesting. You post a lot of thought-provoking content that I read. So, can you give some people advice and how they can grow within their roles and their companies? And what are some things you've done that have given you success throughout the years?
Slow down. Don't be so hard on yourself. Like I say that a lot. I embarrass myself pretty routinely in my mind, and the reality is nobody thinks about that stuff later. Like if I said something dumb on this interview, you guys aren't going to go through the rest of your day thinking, man, what a dummy that guy was, right? There's no,
I won't. Spencer might.
Trying the best I can, and everybody is. And so take it easy on yourself. And then the other thing I would say is to slow down. Like I would have, if it was nice out, I would have gone for a walk before we talked, and with the sole purpose of not thinking about anything. Because if you can clear all that noise out of your head, you can come up with some pretty sane thoughts. But we just keep ourselves so busy and pile stuff on and put so much stress on to accomplish things that you end up not accomplishing anything.
And
that's why I post so many philosophy things. I find philosophy fascinating because that's right at the source of how you do good work and how you be kind to other people.
Yeah.
We can't forget that we're humans.
Yeah. Like it's in the end, that's what you got, right? Nobody's at the end of your life. Nobody cares how many pumps I spec'd. They just don't.
No, I mean, that's great advice. And 20 years ago when you were lying awake at night, you let your mind wander and you came up with stuff, and now you go to your phone and your phone tells you what to think about. Yeah. So we've definitely lost a lot of that time where people come up with ideas and be creative, and that stuff transforms into Elon Musk and Tesla and SpaceX and Apple, that now nobody has it anymore.
Yeah. You need some quiet. I need some quiet. Maybe other people are better at it than I am, but I got to clear that stuff out if I'm going to have a chance.
Well, that's great, Dustin. I appreciate you being on again, and I want to congratulate you on your new role. And I look forward to everything you post, and you have a lot of great topics. If you get a chance, look up, I don't know if you're an quote unquote open networker on LinkedIn, but look up Dustin Schafer with Henderson Engineers and follow a lot of his content. It's really great.
Yeah, I would love that. I also would love it if you disagree with me to challenge me on there. It's not intended to be a one-way.
I love that statement.
Yeah,
and it doesn't have to be a fight, right? It's a challenge and a conversation.
Yeah, correct. Right. I don't know everything, and I don't have to agree with you, and you don't have to agree with me. But
sure,
that's okay.
That's
don't be a jerk on there, though. I promise. The world needs less of that.
Don't post in all caps.
Yeah.
Yelling.
Thanks for joining us on Engineering Tomorrow. If you liked the show, please take a moment to subscribe on iTunes or Spotify. For even more great engineering or construction knowledge, visit engineeringtomorrow.blog.